Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. Due to the discussion of sexual content in this episode, listener discretion is strongly advised. For this episode, my interview guest is Vic Lagina, a former pornographer and the author of the nonfiction book Filthy, The Rise and Pending Death of Vic Lagina. My interview with Vic will follow the note-taking sounds. Vic Lagina, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
I have to ask this first, given your background. How did you get into filming of pornography, and how many pornographic videos did you film or otherwise produce?
So let's go with the second question. 3,792 is the official count of scenes I have produced and or directed during a 20-year career. As far as the how of it, that's a little more complicated and entailed, but I'm happy to take you on the journey. My background is in TV and film production. I have 6 years of higher education, unnecessary 6 years of higher education. And truth is that I was in corporate and commercial video for a while. I was teaching college. I was living in South Florida, which ironically I am right now. And I met a girl and she was a model. And I met her on one of these corporate videos that I would produce. And she said, "Hey, I'm going to move to LA. Would you like to come with me?" And when a beautiful hot girl asks you to do that, you'd be a fool not to say yes. I said yes, but I wasn't really mindful of how good of a partner she potentially could be beyond being hot. Okay, let's face it. LA's tough, man. It's a very tough place to break in, and I was overqualified for a lot of the jobs that I was there that were available. And had I humbled myself and maybe started at the ground floor even at a later age, the story might have ended much differently. No, this guy, what he did was he answered an ad on adultstaffing.com for a dude who wanted to shoot his own porno movie. And I told him I could help him. And so that was my fateful day of my first porn in April of 2002.
Your nonfiction book is titled Filthy, The Rise and Pending, that's with the word pending in parentheses, death of Vic Lagina. Without spoiling too much of your book, is it a memoir or an autobiography, and what is it about?
Well, I'd say it's a memoir, and it's about not only my journey in the porn industry, but about the porn industry in general, stemming really from the birth of the internet porn, which when I got into it, it was still rather in its infancy. And I got in with the company that knew how to market porn effectively in the porn industry. And I really had a front row seat and was very much a part of the creation and building of this huge porn monopoly is what it became. They were a bunch of frat guys that like to make movies, and they knew that movies with big boobs sold. What a surprise there, huh? And eventually they wanted to scale up, and they told me if I tapped into the Los Angeles talent pool, because Florida was kind of amateurish, that they would keep me very busy. And this little group of guys, they were known as Brazzers. So yeah, I started with a company that was Brazzers, and that slowly and over time took over the entire porn industry.
What motivated you to write a book after your career filming and producing porn?
So I was writing a journal. I started doing it in 2015, and that really was the infancy stages of the eventual book. The reason why I started journaling was because it was such a bizarre existence. And at that point, I had been in it around 12 years. And I felt that I would need to put it in a tangible form before the details get too murky. And what I found happening was that around the time that I started writing it, I acknowledged Can I curse on your podcast if it's limited,
Yes,
or would you prefer I
because
didn't?
the episode's going to have an explicit tag on it because
Okay.
pornography is being discussed. You can use profanity on this episode.
Okay. Well, I'll say that my life at the time was very much a shit show. I had a history of getting into personal relationships in the porn industry that were not exactly the most functional. They were tend to be dysfunctional and toxic. And the book was eye-opening in a lot of ways of that I needed to do things better, that I needed to start making better sound decisions, especially with who I was taking up my personal time with. And I would go back to work, and every time that we would have to shut down, let's say someone popped positive for HIV, there was always a moratorium to shut down. So what I would do is then go back to the book or journal and add more. And this journey was ongoing, and it was very therapeutic to get it all down into a tangible form. It wasn't until the porn music ended and I was out completely, and I was out and I was alive. And I really marveled at the whole fact of it was so weird and so bizarre that what if we turn this into a book? And I had some lawyer friends read it, and they gave me the confidence to say that there was something more here, something that was intriguing. So, based on all of that, I decided to really run hard with the concept of publishing it and sharing the story with the masses. And that's how it came to be.
I'm going to ask a follow up question before I move on to the next question I have written down. Now, did the testing for sexually transmitted diseases, did that just cover HIV, or did it cover every sexually transmitted disease?
So it has evolved over time. It has evolved in the right direction, in my opinion. But when I got into it, in the Florida years, it was very interesting. Like, we were using condoms back in Florida, and we only tested for HIV. Now, you have to mind you, this was 2004, 2005. HIV at that point was not the death sentence that it was. But when I moved out into Las Vegas, because I didn't want to live in LA again, what the testing was literally for three things every 30 days. And I think it doesn't take an idiot to realize that is not enough. That leaves a lot of room for error and things to go wrong. It wasn't until about 2012 when there was a outbreak of syphilis in the industry, which they did not test for. Previously, it was only HIV, chlamydia, and gonorrhea. And as you know, there are a hell of a lot more STDs than that. So what they wound up doing was, based on this outbreak in 2012 of syphilis, they decided to make it every 14 days, and they slowly included 7 to 8 testing for these STDs. And it's even gotten more stringent since then. But, since then, AIDS really isn't not a death sentence. And there are a lot of things that current performers take to even mitigate the risk of HIV, which is taking things like PrEP, or even having viral inhibitors if they even contracted the HIV. But the rules in the early stages were very, I'd say they were lackadaisical, but there were hard lines in the industry. Whereas if you were in the gay side, you would stay on the gay side. And if you're on the straight side, you'd stay on the straight side, and there wasn't any crossover. That was like the self-policing that was involved. Nowadays, you don't have that. Everyone's working with each other, and it's gotten a little more crazy than to my liking, I guess you could say.
I'm going to pivot back to your book. How long did it take you to write it?
So from start to finish, which is I start writing to I publish, okay, that entire process was 8.5 years. Now, the last year of it, so I would tell you the entire raw manuscript was done in 7.5 years, but it took an entire year for me to get it edited, which I had a few lawyers look at it that were my friends. And then I had a professional editor go through it. And then I had lawyers go through it, because I talk a lot of shit in the book. And I wanted to write it in a way, and I wanted to have a whole comprehensive where the book was not castrated, and neutered because I thought it needed to be impactful. It needed to be brutally honest. It needed to be true. So I spent, tens of thousands of dollars going through legal so they would help me write it in a way where it takes the wind out of potential lawsuits because of how forthcoming I am. And then once the text was locked, that's when I locked in and started doing the audiobook. And that was a 50-day process with me recording for 40 days.
What are the easiest and hardest aspects of writing a book for you?
The hardest would be editorial because you really have to focus on all the words and whether it's going to sustain a reader, and pacing and is what is your say what even if you're very committed to the words, you have to treat it where you want to keep the reader engaged. And so you have to be very concise with the narrative, and you do have to pour over every word. So that was the hardest part. The easiest part actually was writing and getting it all out and doing it in a way that was real and human and comical. Brutally honest, I think, was all part of it. That was the easier part for me, but chiseling it down to a presentable form, that was what took the most work, and that was the hardest part. But I enjoyed that process immensely.
What was it like to have your book published, and was your book independently or hybrid or traditionally published?
So I did self-publishing because when I was talking with my editor, and he told me the process in which it would be if you went with a traditional publisher, he goes, here's the first step: you get an agent, and then you guys agree on a price of what you're going to sell it for. And then he said this to me very concisely because he's gone through that process and he's done it. He said, that is all the money that you are going to see. And they're going to tell you it didn't make more money. They're going to tell you that it's not making the sales that they thought it would. And I said to him, that sounds very much like a music label. And he's like, that's exactly what it is, but it is in the literary form. So he's like, if you want to do it how you want to do it, he's like, number one, it should be on appearances, and with all the work you put in, it shouldn't appear like a self-published book. It should look like a published through a publishing house book, but at least you control it and you can control the rights. And it's up to you to I guess build self-awareness about the book, build awareness about the book. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been doing this for a while with multiple podcasts. I love talking to people about it. And the gospel of filthy is spreading.
Do you plan on, or are you considering writing more books? And if so, what are some ideas you have for books that you will or may write?
So the people that have consumed the book, and there are people who actually get it, and they're spinning it and reading it and rereading it and spinning in the audiobook multiple times. And I love that because it means I'm striking a chord with them, and they're enjoying the journey, and they're enjoying picking apart the Easter eggs that I littered throughout the book. But the other side of it is that what do they enjoy the most? And it seems like people love the stories of my tales in the trenches. And I'll tell you something, man, like I poured my soul and my heart and my blood and my sweat and my tears into this first book, thinking that this could be it for me. But the truth is, there's a lot more gold in them hills, and I'm mining that gold now, and I'm trying to figure out what is it going to be. It could be just audiobook entries because people really do enjoy the audiobook, and I really enjoyed creating the audiobook. So that is probably most likely what is coming next.
Aside from writing, do you have any projects that you're working on after leaving the porn industry?
Well, the truth is that there's a trailer for the book on my website, viclagina.com. And initially, that project was going to be a movie of sorts. Like, it really, if you're going to boil it down, it would be 6 days of a pornographer that was all based on real occurrences. And I shot it in 2021, and I was waiting on the editor to deliver his cut. And I foolishly maybe said, time is not of the essence. I want you to get it right. And I'm thinking he wasn't really the right editor. But while I was sitting there and twiddling my thumbs waiting for this cut, I finished the book version of Filthy. So perhaps it was fortuitous in that sense that he did take forever. And once he delivered his cut, it was very underwhelming. But I thought that we captured enough of that gold to make a trailer for the book that really shows what this could be as a television medium. And if I had my druthers, man, if I had my wishes, if I could say, what do you want to do next? It would be make a television show based on all this, because it's all true. And you know what they say, truth is stranger than fiction. So I really hope that there's someone out there who gets it and they want to take it to a higher level. That is what I'm putting out into the universe. That is what I'm hoping for.
I have three more questions, and they're
Sure.
about the porn industry and your work in them, although the second one's going to be kind of a two-part question. A common perception of the porn industry is that drug use is rampant in the industry. Is that true or false?
Well, I don't like speaking in absolutes, and I can only speak for my experience. But I have found that in my experience, and with some others, I'm not going to say everyone, yes, that's a factual statement. We all had our reasons for medicating. And I discovered through the book why I was medicating. The light went off when I was writing the book and I was recapping all of the people that I knew directly who died. Some of them were drug overdoses. Some were suicide. Some were other things. But there seemed to be a thread in the ones who chose to take their lives or really medicate and overdose, was that there was a lot of pain in the industry. And for me, I'm a sensitive guy, and I want everyone who stepped on my set to have a good time and to be treated with respect. But you can go in with good intentions, but you have people who are carrying that darkness with them. And for me to do this as a job, I was starting to do drugs that I normally wouldn't do. Like normally I was a weed, mushrooms, acid kind of guy, occasional drink, but I got myself into the harder stuff. And when I say the harder stuff, it was the cocaine. And I don't do it anymore, nor would I say I had a legit cocaine addiction, but I was definitely abusing and I was definitely numbing. Others, I'd say they have their vice, but it's not absolute. You have people who are stone sober who do this. So it runs the gamut is the most honest answer I could give you.
What was dating like in the porn industry, and did working in the porn industry affect your own sex life?
Okay, so the sex life aspect of it, that's a legit question, and I get it a lot. The truth is, you would think that a guy who sees sex all the time, they might have to push it more to keep it spicy in the bedroom. That was not me. My sex life still is pretty vanilla, and I don't have to push it. But you would find that there were some people who might trade a drug addiction for a sex addiction. I saw some male performers who fit that mold. But relationships wise, it was tough. It was a struggle for me because I wasn't a performer, and I was just a producer and a director, and I was around women naked who were having sex. Sometimes they were very forward about wanting to spend personal time with me. And even when I was in committed relationships, that took a toll on the partner that I was with at the time, even though I wasn't acting on it. So I tried to date outside of the industry very unsuccessfully. While they were intrigued, it was something where they couldn't, I was more of a novelty, if that makes sense. And I didn't think, I felt that they were curious about my job, but they couldn't handle being in a relationship with me. So I was relegated for dating people within the industry. And depending on the situation or the cycle, it could go in darker areas in terms of me being committed to them, or it could have been just more of casual relationships in the business because I was looking for meaningful connections in the porn industry, as ridiculous as that might sound.
One final question. Did you suffer from any mental health issues while active as a filmer and a producer in the porn industry? And if so, what was that like?
Nothing diagnosed in that sense. I think there was like the self-medicating aspect of it, but I'll tell you this, the journey was getting pretty harrowing towards the end. I could tell you that I was getting ground down from a mental standpoint. I had to have a constant battle of staying in the light, and I had means in which to do it, which were a good group of friends that were outside of the industry that would be sensical and positive for me. There was also the music festival aspects of things where I would literally, if porn was getting to be too much, I would go on a music festival for about 5 days and be around positive people. And that would get my needle back into the more positive side. You know, it was a definite fight between light and dark. Light eventually won out for me. And, you know, I'm grateful that I was able to get through it all, still standing, still positive, still happy, and right now I'm in a healthy relationship. So things worked out for me despite the 20 years that were pretty crazy, interesting, pulls on the extremities, all of that. I got out and I'm a very positive person now. So if there's ever a tale in the porn industry where people think it's nothing but darkness, it's nothing this, it's nothing that, it's nothing negative, it's all negative. I could be the case study that would say that is not the case. It can go in a different direction, and you can get to a point where you're feeling acknowledging it was a non-existence, but having an experience where you are, it landed you in a positive place, if that makes sense.
Vic, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were a fascinating guest to interview.
Hey, man, if you've got more questions, I'm all here for it. I do appreciate you having me. As you can tell, I'm an open book. I really am, and I have been getting a lot of positive feedback on it. I think with anyone who's thinking of writing a book, or if they feel they have a unique experience, I always say just be honest. Put it out there, man. Like if you're talking about your life and your existence, I think people really respect the honesty. They respect the humanity of it, because your words, especially for a writer, are everything, and they should have meaning, and they should have depth, and they should affect people. I think if you're doing good writing, that is exactly the byproduct of it, where you move and affect others. And my feeling was when doing this is like, I don't have extremely lofty goals here. I want to create a work of art, and I want to create something that is going to eventually be something somewhat of a cult classic. And based on the feedback I got, I have created that, and I am so grateful for it.
To say the least, it was interesting to interview Vic, and he was an insightful guest. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.